You're live, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting as the Crime and Disorder panel tonight on Thursday, the 12th of October 2023. My name is Councillor Paula Spenceley and I'm the Vice Chairperson of this committee, but I'm sitting tonight as the Chairperson, as you can see. Members, we are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Could I ask members to avoid approaching the top table, as this could create interference with the cameras and the live stream. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphones, which sometimes we do get wrong, so we'll try and get it right tonight. Therefore, can I ask that when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphone and to turn it off when you've finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. So we move on to apologies for absence. Can I have the apologies for absence, please, Sean? I know we've got Councillor Simon Morgan. Are there any others, please?
No, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to the minutes. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of October 2022, so we've got two lots of minutes here, found on pages 5 to 8, and of the meeting held on the 2nd of March 2023, on pages 9 to 12, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Now, before I say this, I think it needs to be, if I'm correct, somebody was at the last meeting. Is that right, Clark? At those meetings, it is. Thank you. So who in here were at those meetings apart from myself? You were. Okay, so you'd second it. Okay, so should we both vote on it and agree it by assent? Fantastic. Thank you. I think we move on from there. Okay. Declarations of interest. So, to disclose the existence, members, and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda tonight, having regard to paragraph 9 and Appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. So at any time that you become aware of an interest. Do I have any tonight? Any to declare? Thank you. Okay, we move on then. Public participation, which is item 5. I can advise that we have not received any submission tonight from members of the public. So that brings us happily on to item 6, which is our Maldon District Safety Partnership update. That's the report accompanying that, I should say, is found on pages 13 to 34. And tonight we have Spencer Clark, our Community Safety Manager, to present the report. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. I might just have to play around with this to get it to where we are. There you go. Thank you, Chair. Members will note I've done a streamlined report for this particular meeting at the request of the Chair. So I'm not planning on going through the report in any detail because members have had an opportunity to review it in advance. And I'm not also intending to speak anything about police performance because we have Chief Inspector Ballard to talk about police, who's in a much better position than what I am to talk about policing. So what I thought I'd do at the request of the Chair is to go through some of the statutory duties we have as a partnership. But what I've done is broken up our 5 priorities into a slide for each priority, and then just to give you an overview of what we've been doing recently on each priority, and more importantly, what's going to be happening in the future, a little bit of horizon scanning. So for members that aren't aware of what we do around community safety, the Community Safety Partnership isn't just Maldon District Council, it's a group of other statutory authorities. So that also includes Essex County Council, Essex Police, Essex Fire and Rescue Service, Probationary Services and Health. So they're the statutory partners who can be scrutinised under crime and disorder. So each year we go through the process of what's called a strategic assessment. So that's based on data which we receive on from a number of parties. All of those parties I involved earlier, which then leads us to look at what our priorities are going to be each year. We also base our priorities on public perception, which is also very important because how the public feel about crime as well. So on to slide 1. So this is the priority around tackling crime and reducing reoffending. And you'll see the little subset there. The focus around that is around serious violence, gangs, drug trafficking and high harm offences. So that's our main focus when we talk about tackling crime and reducing reoffending. One of the things you'll note there is that we have a statutory duty now, the serious violence duty coming earlier this year. Fortunately, our Essex Violence and Vulnerability Unit, that's what VVU stands for, have produced an Essex Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. So they've produced a document for the whole of Essex on serious violence. What we'll have is a local input. I received that local input today, which gives us lots of data around all of the areas in Essex broken down into wards where the most serious violence is. I'm pleased to tell you that Maldon is the lowest in terms of incidents per 100,000 population. In fact, compared to last year, there's been a reduction by 12.5%, which is bigger than the Essex reduction around serious violence. So at this present moment in time, we're in a good position around that. So we'll be contributing to some more local detail around that joint duty, and that's one of the key things we've been looking at. Other ways in which we tackle serious violence, we got quite an effective CCTV system in Maldon. It was renewed just over 3 years ago, where we put capital funding in place. So areas such as the High Street, Promenade Park and Burnham Riverside Park have had renewed CCTV. I'm going to talk about 3 projects as well tonight where we've been successful in gaining some funding from the Police Commissioner's Safer Streets Fund. These 3 projects are broken down to a total value of £189,000. Just to give you an idea of how successful that is, our annual grant from the Police Commissioner is just over £14,000 a year. So when you see that sum of money has been achieved, it's really good. And we've also got matched funding for those projects. So just to talk about, I'll talk about one of them now, which is the Burnham Town CCTV system. So I've been working with Burnham Town Council for a couple of years ago, where we've been scoping the idea for CCTV. And fortunately, in this current financial year, Burnham Town Council have an allocation of £25,000 for a CCTV system. So it was really good because I'd already priced up a scheme. We had a scheme in place, ready to go. So when we bid for the funding, that £25,000 could virtually doubled to another £50,000 because we needed 50% matched funding. So that will make the scheme much better. It will also extend the scheme to the initially planned scheme, which will cover Burnham Rail Station as well now, which is one of our hotspots in the town. So we'll be increasing that. The plans are to complete that in this current financial year. So that's we've already got that in place to start moving on that once we get the funding agreement, which is expected this month. Other sort of works we do is around the J9 domestic abuse awareness, where we get safer places and J9 to come in and talk to people about domestic abuse awareness. That's really important that we do that with not just schools, but also any interested groups, councillors, parish councillors. So if anyone's interested in that, that's funded for another year now by the Police Commissioner, and they're done online once a month. So if any members are interested in doing the J9 domestic abuse awareness, but again, domestic abuse has been going in the right direction for the last couple of years now. We had a peak around the pandemic, which was, because we had perpetrators and victims living at home, but now that's going in the right direction, which is really good. Also, what we do is we do quite a bit of work with probation services, unpaid work. Probably remember it's community payback, what it used to be called. So we're working with probation services, and they're really, really keen to extend that now in all areas of Essex and the district. And I know we do quite a lot of work around our green spaces and crematorium with the probation service. And the other important thing is what we need to, which we need to get better on, although it's again going in the right direction, is effective engagement with communities. But again, I'm not going to say too much about that because I know Mr. Ballard picks up on some of the work we've been doing, good work we've been doing with the police recently. So our second priority for the partnership is driving down antisocial behaviour in public places, with the main focus of that being on youth nuisance and improving partnership visibility. Many members of the partnership do a lot of work around that. So we will patrol hotspots, do community engagement, and more importantly, listen to the concerns of the public to know what's going on and where. Our community engagement team play a key role in providing reassurance and intelligence, and have a very good relationship with the young people of Maldon District, which again, it's not all bad stuff. Being able to talk to young people and point them in the right direction is also a good way forward. We also have to effectively case manage our complaints and use our powers where appropriate. You'll see the powers are changed about 10 years ago. The Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act came in. It made it a lot more flexible as to how we can deal with issues. Minor issues we deal by means of a warning, a community protection warning, which can escalate to a community protection notice, a written notice, and can ultimately end up with a criminal behaviour order. You probably remember the old ASBOs, something similar to that, a criminal behaviour order, and we've been successful in putting those into place. Other parts of that legislation we can use are things like closure powers. So, say for example, if we have a house cuckooed by a drug dealer, we've got the powers to close that property for 3 months so that only the person who lives there can come out of that property. Restorative justice and mediation. We've got a couple of complex cases in Maldon we're looking at the moment, whereby sometimes neighbours don't just get on, and it's not always a criminal meets a criminal threshold for we're dealing with it. So we quite often in such cases speak to the Police Commissioner's office, who have a restorative justice and mediation team there. Restorative justice is a really good way of trying to explore ways of resolving problems, and one of the cases we're dealing with is mediation between 3 particular families. So I don't know if it will work, but it's the best way of trying it. Another important thing that we need to do, you'll see we've got this focus on youth nuisance. We actually need to give our young people something meaningful to do. So provision of diversionary activities, such as the Monday night Just Play we do over at the Plume. CVS have an excellent programme called The Power of Gaming, which I believe has extended out to Southminster now. So that's been running in Maldon for about 18 months now, but now got funding to extend that. And the skate ramps, which brings me on to another area of the Police Commissioner funding. So the skate ramps in Maldon are beginning to look a bit sorry. And there's 106 funding in there for the next financial year to deliver a skate park project there. We've been successful in getting some funding to around community safety to make that a lot better when it's complete. So some of the areas we're going to be looking at are putting additional CCTV in, putting lighting in for the skateboard park, which is something we done last year in Chelmsford, so that people can use the skate park throughout the year, which is important. And these sort of things are what young people want. People like lighting, people like cameras, they like to feel safe where they're doing these types of projects. But the other more interesting piece of work we're doing is with a charity called Make Space for Girls. So a lot of the things you'll see in our green spaces are designed default male, not by, you know, so things like skate parks, Mooga pitches, urban basketball courts, they're not designed for males and males only, but if you look into the detail around it, 85% of those users are male. So by working with the charity Make Space for Girls, we're going to be doing consultation with 13 to 18-year-old teenage girls to see what they want from the green spaces. So that's going to be a really important bit of consultation, which hopefully will inform planning policy going forward, because because it's not right, is it? That it's trying to make it more inclusive. So when we look at the skate ramps, we shouldn't just design a skate ramp for skaters. We should also design what we call a transition skate ramp, or a skate ramp for learners, so those who are less confident and want to learn how to do it. So that's included in this as part of the consultation. So really pleased, and also working with some street artists to do some artwork around the area as well. So on to our third priority, and that's around identifying and supporting vulnerable people. So the focus on this particular area is around domestic abuse, which I highlighted earlier, VAWG, which is violence against women and girls, social isolation, suicide prevention, poor mental health, and hate crime. So it's, again, we do quite a lot of work across all of these areas. Our main focus is around education and events. So we've been into the schools, commissioned Safer Places to do talks on healthy relationships, which is really important. There's been some, lots of press around people like social media influencers like Andrew Tate and the impacts that's having on young males. And so it's important we get in there and speak to not just girls, but also young boys about their behaviour. And, so that's important we do that. Crucial Crew is something we deliver to Year 6 students. So that's their transition year before they go up to secondary education. For the third year running, we've commissioned Tick Box Productions, who are a drama company who do a drama on called Lines, based on county lines and exploitation and knife crime. And once they've done the 45-minute drama, the young people have an hour and a half to speak to the actors about what could be done differently. So they can be a police officer or a parent, and they just explore ways of how they can be helped better. I put about Safe, Well and Secure on there and the importance around that. So Safe, Well and Secure is a project which Essex Fire and Rescue lead on. It was only, I think this time last year when I presented to the committee, I explained that we'd had 3 tragic deaths in the space of 18 months in Maldon through fires at home. And every one of those ones which we investigated, the victim was very similar. They were over 60, they were socially isolated and had cluttering, hoarding tendencies. Probably not known to services, but almost certainly known to their community. So we really wanted to see what we could do better to try and reduce the risk of home fires. The added impact of the cost of living crisis and the energy crisis, particularly in places like the Dengie Peninsula, you might have people who are what we call asset rich with their own home, but cash poor, just living on a single pension. So could end up sort of burning things like pallets rather than actual fires. So we really needed to look at that. So we worked with the fire service, and they crunched all of their data to see what the best area would be to tackle. Area we really looked at was probably 60-year-olds whose kids have left home. So this is the profile we looked at, which was probably the sort of best sort of area to tackle. So we knocked on 1,499 doors over 3 days. I wish it had been 1,500, so I wouldn't have to have written that. But that's how many we did knock on. And when I say we, Les, who's our tri-service pilot officer for the fire service, arranged it all, and I think he was a bit gobsmacked when a whole army of officers from the council and voluntary services went there to help him. So that's why we got 512 contacts from doing that, which related to 95 referrals and 117 home fire checks. So when I say the referrals, it might not necessarily be a fire-related referral. It might be a referral to a social landlord for a handrail or something like that. So really good piece of work and a really good way of targeting an area which, through data, we think we know is at risk. For the March meeting next year, I've been promised that somebody from the fire service will come and present to us, which will be really good. Unfortunately, the station commander was on annual leave and couldn't make tonight, but I've been given the promise that somebody will be along to the next one. Another couple of areas there around prevent and protect. The prevent duty is around preventing violent extremism. I actually am the chair of the Essex Prevent group, so as you can imagine, I've been quite busy since last weekend. Prevent's sort of turned itself on its head in the last 3 or 4 years. So when we were originally looking at prevent for our area, we were looking at the threat of Islamic terrorism. I'm not saying that's not a threat anymore, but the biggest threat in Essex is the extreme far right, and more in particular, if you wanted to focus where you put your attention, and it was only in a meeting a few hours ago with higher education establishments, would be 14 to 18-year-old boys are most at risk for radicalisation at the moment. So I always say to people, the most dangerous place for our children at the moment is in their own bedroom. So the number of young people during the pandemic, particularly young boys who got bored, who are accessing extreme far-right material, and we always say it will never happen here. When you see the headlines tomorrow of a 19-year-old boy from Great Notley's was arrested on terrorism charges today, that's not far up the road from us. And, and Braintree District's not very dissimilar to Maldon in many ways, shapes or forms. So there's a lot of work going on around that, and we're trying to get some funding from the Home Office to do some wider training, particularly in higher education establishments, because that's where our biggest risk is. Our council duty under Prevent is really around our IT structure and not allowing hate speeches in council buildings. And since we don't tend to have any, it's not a big risk to us. But the new duty comes in on the 31st of December. So I'm working alongside officers to make sure we meet all of that criteria. The other one is protect duty. I don't know when this is coming in. It should get royal assent this autumn. The protect duty has been called Martin's Law. That's about, recall the tragic bombing in Manchester and the inquest around that. That will bring in some duties for councils around publicly accessible spaces, publicly accessible locations, and it will mean that some staff will have to have competency training around risk and terrorism as a result of that. I should imagine that will actually become a duty early in the new year if it receives royal assent in autumn. Excuse me 1 second. The other area I was going to focus on, I think it was actually, was it your good self who brought up about women's safety?
It was.
So women's safety, the third part of the bid to the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's Office is doing a project around women's safety for Maldon District. So we've done a very successful one in Chelmsford, which we launched about this time last year. So we're going to look to replicate that project for Maldon. It will include a video filmed in Maldon, so for the social media campaign, and using a consultant to do training with businesses and professionals in Maldon District. So that's something we'll get going probably in the springtime for Maldon, but we've got the funding in place to that. So they're the 3 big projects we're getting funded by that. Again, so much more data around women's safety. We have a mapping tool called Op Minerva, where we've Essex has collaborated with Nottingham-Trent University, where we can overlay maps about women's safety. And I've already spoken about Make Space for Girls and trying to increase inclusivity for a lot of the projects that we do. Fourth priority is around rural crime, and this was around increasing the confidence in reporting rural crime, because remember a couple of years ago we had lots of rural crime, but it wasn't necessarily being reported. And if we don't know about it, we can't deal with it. So I think that's going to change direction now. This year, the Essex Rural Crime Strategy was not relaunched. It was the first strategy come to its end, and this was renewed. And it impacts on lots of areas of rural crime, agricultural theft. You know, I don't know how much a tractor costs, but it's probably £200,000. So it might be small in terms of numbers, but in terms of value and the impact it can have on the farming trade, absolutely massive. Large fly tipping things, heritage crime, and unauthorised encampments. They're all big things which happen in rural areas where we've been trying to impact. Again, our community engagement team do loads of work around that. They do the investigation of environmental crime through OpFume, and things like checking waste carriers' licences. That's really impacted, because if people, a lot of the criminality particularly on the Dengie Peninsula, being able to check licences and things and making sure that what they're doing is good and proper is really important. I did mention the Tri-Service Officer role. Les Davis is employed by the police, fire and ambulance service. He's absolutely fantastic. There's another Les in Uttlesford now. So they like Les so much, they've extended the role to Uttlesford to another rural area. And he just gets into all of the rural areas. If we're doing a patrol anywhere, Les will be there. But it's the important stuff, he's doing the advice and things like that. And he's a trained medic as well, which is also important. So again, the joint work in the patrols with Essex Rural Engagement Team, sorry, my voice is going, and the Environment Agency. And again, that bottom one, I'm not going to say too much about that, because I think Chief Inspector might pick up on Hare Corson as part of his presentation. Finally, on our final priority for Maldon is promoting road safety and challenging irresponsible driving. Again, the community safety team are CSAS accredited, the Community Safety Accreditation Scheme of Essex Police, which enables them to do enforcement above and beyond what the police do. We've got 45 locations across 18 parishes in Maldon. You can see the true cam catches for the last year was 3,505. We bought them a new unit, which we saw in the office earlier. So the old unit was getting a bit the old true cam was about 6 years old. So we've bought a new lightweight laser cam unit now, which uploads the data instantly. So not only does it streamline it for the staff, so they don't have to do all the paperwork now. That's up and running now, so we'll be able to hopefully do more of that. We also rely very much on Community Speedwatch, the volunteers in the community, and the South Essex Roads Partnership attend most of the community engagement events we do, so they'll have their cars along there to talk about road safety and push that Vision Zero message. And again, education by SEP, but I'm not SEP, South Essex Parking Partnership. I'm not going to say anything about that because Mr. Binder's going to talk about that as part of his presentation. The Roads Partnership and the education team at the fire service who go into the schools. And I've got a list of all the schools they've been to in Maldon. It's not just around road safety. They do one on hate crime. They do one on the Great Fire of London. Lots of different subjects. So that is my new streamlined presentation, Chair.
Thank you.
Open to any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Clark, and I think it did help really explain some of the things that are going on. So before I move to comment and debate, I've got the recommendation on page 13 of the report, which is simply that members review and comment on the current progress of the initiatives undertaken by the partnership to date. So do I have a seconder for that quickly before we start the debate? Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Neil. So following that, I will open the floor to questions, comments. Councillor Morley.
Yes, thank you for that. I remember from the last meeting you were saying about the pandemic. Would you say the domestic violence is down to a level just before the pandemic, would you say, or is it still going down?
I don't have the actual figures in front of me, but it's a steady downward trend. And what's really important is high-risk offences have significantly gone down. And it was the high-risk offences which were hurting us during the pandemic. As I explained, when you've got victims and perpetrators living in the same home, that had a really big impact. So the high risk of really, and medium risk, I believe, as well, have also gone down. So it's a really good trend. There's been lots of work going on around domestic abuse, and it's particularly in the last couple of years has sort of turned it on, not just protecting the victim, but also challenging the perpetrator and making sure that the perpetrator's getting that help and advice as well. I don't know if you've seen the Reflect programme, which was, I think it was originally released about a year ago, actually got an award for the impacts it's made on challenging people's behaviour, because it is very much about behaviour change, and you can guarantee that most perpetrators to domestic abuse haven't just abused one person. It's probably a long list of many people. So it's important that we change the perpetrators as well as focusing on the victims as well.
Yeah, I think also the lighting would be a massive, I know with the economic and environmental impact, but I think safety overrules that really, if you can, with the lighting. But also going on to, you were saying about fly tipping, the snag is now they've brought these new rules out with furniture and things like that, mattresses. Wood also shortly coming into hazardous waste. So I think you're going to have to be a lot more vigilant with, in particular, waste carriers license and things like that. But I think you're going to see an increase in fly tipping. It's just going to be natural with, especially sofas, because they are expected to get rid of now. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's very important, a very good comment. The more work we can do around that, the better. The more way we can use technology like automatic number plate recognition. We've got the Dengie Peninsula well covered by that, but doing that joint work with other agencies is also really important. So even things like the true cam enforcement, somebody being present on the roads, creating a hostile environment really for fly tippers really is important.
Any other questions? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Yes, you talked about engaging young people, and I think you said you were rolling out something into Southminster. What's your programme for rolling that out any further than, I presume that it's in Maldon, Burnham, Heybridge and now Southminster, so I'd be interested in what else is to come, please. Thank you.
So that particular project is run by the CVS, Voluntary Service, and is funded by Essex Violence and Vulnerability Unit. So it's only really started off in Maldon for about 18 months. The next place they were going to take it to, which I believe has started, is Southminster. We'll look at hotspots across the district and give consideration to where it can be extended to, but again, that's subject to funding and subject to the people and the volunteers being able to be used by the CVS to do that. But any particular areas, we're pushing as much as we can in all areas across the district using the youth service. I know one area up is at Tollsbury, I believe you're from, was trying to get that youth club back up and running. It's one of these things. We're struggling so much with post-pandemic. All of those really good people who used to volunteer aren't volunteering anymore. We're even with things like street pastors, we're really suffering with volunteers and SOS buses. So I think it's something we just need to do a bit more work on, because we need to make sure that all of the outlying districts have youth diversionary projects, not just Maldon District and Burnham. So it's something which we'll certainly consider and expand if there's resources available to do so.
Brilliant. So any other questions, members? Well, I've got some questions, so I wanted to make sure that members have spoken first. Okay, so my first question, Mr. Clark, relates to the use of CCTV in Maldon and Burnham and the projects that you've got there, which sound great. But I wondered, talking about Southminster and Heybridge and other potential hotspots, are there any plans to increase CCTV coverage there, or anything that's going on?
So in terms of plans for extension, none at present, but we have been trialling new technology in rural locations. One of them at a road in South Hanningfield, which the Chief Inspector will be very familiar with, where we have a street racing problem. And it's worked relatively effectively and low cost in comparison to other projects which we've used. The main cost of trying to integrate cameras into a central video management system is really expensive, but using mobile phone data and having connectivity like that on a different system, it's something which we can look at for hotspots, I think. So it's something if there was support for projects, we'd certainly be happy to have a discussion to look at hotspots around the district.
Brilliant. That's really worth knowing, I think, and going back to parishes, because a lot of our members are parish councillors as well. Another thing that I'd quickly like to ask is around, you mentioned Operation Minerva and the mapping tool for women's safety. This is a meeting for the whole district, so I don't want to start going on about Heybridge, because I can be guilty of that sometimes. But we all draw the examples we know, don't we? So, for example, we've got a path there where we've not had a light, and multiple women have approached councillors, and we've tried to sort it out. And Essex are saying that they need the police to declare it dangerous. It's a little walkthrough that they're having trouble replacing the light there for technical problems. But again, in terms of using the mapping tool, that's an area that I guess we'd want reported. So who can access that mapping tool, and how will it work?
So the Minerva mapping tool is professionals only, but only about 5 weeks ago, the county council released another mapping tool for the public. I will send the link to that to the committee clerk so that members can have a look at that, whereby you can go onto a map of anywhere in Essex, stick a dot on the map, and if you feel unsafe, tell them why you feel unsafe. So I would urge you to put a dot on the map in Heybridge.
We'll all go round the path.
If you go onto the map at the moment, I can assure you that there's about 20 reports around Chelmsford bus station, which is probably the most reported place in Essex at the moment in terms of women's safety. So if it's something like bad lighting, antisocial behaviour, or overgrown bushes, as we spoke earlier, you know, lots of things can impact on people's safety. Things like improving natural surveillance is a really important thing. You know, being able to see round a corner, or having a corner lit so that you can see round it. So I'll put that in the link for the minutes, if that's okay, Chair.
Fantastic, that would be great. And I've got just two very quick questions. One is around Speedwatch and how many Speedwatch groups we have across the district now, and whether or not you could possibly get us a link through the clerk for our various communities for Speedwatch, because I think that's a really strong thing.
I can certainly do that. I don't know how many there are, but the lady who deals with it at the fire service, I think she's employed by, will be able to send out the information for members. That'd
be good. And very quickly, Les Davis, our wonderful Tri-Services officer, I remember that he was a pilot. Well, not literally a pilot, but I mean, it was a pilot project. So has that been, is he permanent now? Will that be reviewed, or can we be satisfied that we're going to keep him?
I think on Monday night, Mr. Hurst, the police commissioner, referred to him as the Tri-Service officer, and there's no mention of the word pilot in there.
Okay,
so I'm making the assumption that on the basis that they've now extended the role to Uttlesford, that it's no longer a pilot, and they'll continue to fund that. Although it's always difficult when roles are funded by 3 different organisations, like police, fire and ambulance service, but I think they'd be on a hiding to nothing if they took the role away.
No, brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'm just going to see if I can agree the recommendation by assent that we've all noted that report. Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to move on now to our next item, which is a police performance update, and it's a verbal report. So agenda item 7. And it's going to be delivered by Chief Inspector Paul Ballard, who I'm delighted to welcome back to the Chamber this evening. Thank you. Please present the report, Mr. Ballard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. 1 second, let me just get it up in a viewable fashion. Okay, lovely. So good evening, everybody. Good evening, Chair. My name's Chief Inspector Paul Ballard, and this will be the presentation from Essex Police from a Maldon District perspective for this committee. So just a bit of an overview. Let's see if that's going to work. Yes. So your district has a 24-hour response policing team based within the building. And in addition to that, you have a Maldon Town team, which are also based here at the council offices since October 2022. And also the community policing team that's based out of the Chelmsford Safety Hub in Chelmsford City Council that have responsibilities both within the Chelmsford District and also the Maldon District. The community policing team, inclusive of the Maldon Town team, work alongside both the local community safety partnership and other partners to work towards those community safety partnership priorities, but similarly they also work towards the priorities set by our Chief Constable, Mr. Harrington, which is on the next slide. So this is the Essex Police Force Plan on a page. It looks a little bit busy, but I promise you it really is quite straightforward. So our main 4 priorities will always be our victims, making sure that we do the best for our victims as we possibly can, to tackle violence, to deal with and support and then tackle vulnerability in relation to them being the victims of crime, and also supporting and preventing them being the victims of crime, and then being visible in the community. You'll see in the middle there, we've got our policing priorities in regards to specific offences, but in general terms, the main effort is around the outside, and that we'll always look to try and prevent crime and antisocial behaviour. When we're not able to prevent it, we'll make sure that we respond as we should and appropriately. And once we've responded, we'll make sure that we investigate it as we should. And then how we will work. I appreciate that's probably quite small, so I do apologise. But in general terms, it outlays how we are going to achieve those things and do them as we should do. On the next slide, we have the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner's 12 policing priorities in relation to crime. You'll see there's a significant amount of crossover with the force plan, which is as it should be. Some of those are specific to more rural crime areas, which is wholly appropriate, along with safer roads and also increase in collaboration with other forces, other partners and other emergency services. Now we get into the Maldon specific stuff. So in the last 12 months, up to the rolling 12 months, up to the end of last month, crime in the Maldon District is down 14.4%. That's all crime. Antisocial behaviour is down 49.4%. And to put some context on that, that is 242 less reports of antisocial behaviour in the last 12 months compared to the 12 months before. Residential burglary is down 11.9%, and you'll see there from the less offences when compared to the year before that there's a relatively low number of residential burglaries in the Maldon District, thankfully, anyway. But that is against an increase across the force of an average of 5.1%, so particular outlier in the Maldon District. Other areas of note for the Maldon District, violence with injury is down by 7.4%. Robbery is down by 20%. However, theft offences are up by 41.8%, with the majority of those being in relation to shoplifting and what we classify as other theft, which I can go into a bit more detail if there are any questions on that afterwards, because it's quite a specific terminology we're using. So just a bit of an overview around this. So every quarter, Essex Police, I say we employ them every quarter, they're constantly employed to do this, but we get results every quarter. A private independent company who is not just engaged with by Essex Police, but other forces around the country as well, to conduct a public perception survey with the public of each district. It's a representative sample of individuals are contacted within each policing district in Essex, and they are asked a number of questions, and their responses are recorded and then anonymised and then put back to the force in relation to a quarterly report. So you'll see there, there's quite a bit of data there, and hopefully it's not too small, I think, on the big screen, but you'll see that the perception data for Maldon is a little bit up and down. What I would say in relation to this is that you'll notice that some of the areas where these are slightly higher is during the COVID period. And that's not something that was unique to Essex. That was something that was nationally seen across similar surveys in relation to public perception around policing, and the confidence in policing did see a large increase during the COVID affected times. Which you've then seen is what we would address as a sort of not a return to normality, but certainly a return to a degree of what we had before COVID. But similarly, we are still in a better position across a number of different measures in relation to those. Just to provide a little bit of additional context to this slide and the next slide, for the Maldon District specifically, we are either above the force average, the Essex force average, or at the force average for every single one of these perception surveys. So we are not an outlier from a negative perspective in any of these survey questions. And similarly, Essex Police as a whole is above the general average for other forces of a similar make, size and demographic. So we are in a good position, not just in Essex, but also in the Maldon District around our public perception. However, of course, we're always looking to improve. I'll leave that slide there a little bit just so you can see the type of questions that we've asked, and I appreciate I probably could have clicked through that halfway through my explanation, but you'll see there. But I can always come back to these, and I'm more than happy to give further information on any of these at the end if any members have questions. So how are we doing it? What are we doing in Maldon? So, in Maldon, we've seen an uplift of officers following the PUP uplift that's seen nationally, the extra 20,000 police officers to policing from the government. That uplift has ended as of March the 31st this year. So we have had our PUP uplift, which has, for the Maldon District, has predominantly resulted in the Maldon Town team starting here in October last year. But it also has meant a maintaining of the 24-hour response capability out of the council offices. In addition to that, we are risk assessing every single one of our antisocial behaviour incidents from a risk and threat harm risk factors to ensure that we are providing the appropriate response. And we are also ensuring that we are placing our vehicles with the appropriate badges and in the appropriate areas to provide confidence within rural policing. We've already mentioned our tri-service officer, so I won't talk about him anymore because he does a fantastic job and we all know that. We have a community safety engagement officer for Maldon, which, just to give you a bit of an overview, that's an officer whose role is designed to ensure that we are engaging with the community in a way that we should be. We're listening to the community and we are telling the community what we're doing, so that we're not just assuming that we know what the issues are. Obviously, we like to think we know what the issues are, and we always try and predict what the issues are, but similarly, and if not more importantly, listening to the community and understanding what the community's issues are is where we want to be, and certainly what we look to do. I've already mentioned the dedicated town team for Maldon, which are doing some fantastic work, and then we've got close liaison with our partners and our neighbourhood watch teams within the district as well, which really provide us with some good support. We have regular operations in and around Maldon in regards to antisocial vehicle use and speeding, and additionally we've got some really good links in with local community engagement with clubs, scouts and various different schools, so that's very positive as well. One thing I put in here, or I asked to be put in here, and it isn't for any other reason than, as you might have remembered from the slide, that one thing that we are quite high for in Maldon, as per the public perception survey, was the importance that the community felt we had around foot patrols and visible foot patrols. I'm glad to see that, unlike last time I was here, there's actually all of my officers have got hats on, because one of them didn't in the last presentation that I gave. Yes, so yeah. Glad they listened to the feedback. And as I say, this is a really, really useful tactic. It's both a useful tactic from a policing perspective, but also from a public perception and an engagement point of view. So that's something that's really clear, and I make clear. So whilst, I have to be, operationally sound with how I utilise my 24-hour response team, the Maldon Town team have the capability and certainly the drive to be out on foot, talking to the community and being visible in the community. So we always look to do that as much as we are able, and they certainly do it an awful lot. Those 5 photos aren't respective of a whole year's worth of work, I can very much assure you of that. Community engagement. So we do an awful lot of this, and that's only a very, very quick snapshot of some of the pictures that they've taken at various events. Now, the community engagement takes on a number of different forms. It can be community engagement specific to a particular demographic or area, or it can be community engagement at large public events, or similarly community engagement that we have ourselves initiated at various different parts of the district, because we've been informed there's an issue there. So it's both proactive and reactive. And we obviously offer the opportunity for members of the public to voice their concerns, talk to us about the issues that are affecting them, and provide us with information that's really vital in how we deal with antisocial behaviour and crime. Just to give you a bit of an update, it's a bit of a police-only type endeavour at the moment, but we've also, to improve how Essex Police record and audit and make sure that we are in the right places, we are all now recording on an app, which sounds very swanky, and it is actually very, very good because it provides us with a good bit of mapping. All the engagement that we're doing via a QR code, so any officers that we are doing their community engagement, we can strategically view and see exactly how many we've done every month and where we're doing them and the feedback that we're doing them, and that's all getting placed into a centralised team that then provide certain strategic reports to officers to be able to make sure that we're doing a better job, and it's not as necessarily randomised as it had previously been. So that's something that's very positive and has been in for about 4 months now, so that's very good. It also means that, Chair, I think next time I'll make a mental note and a visible note after I finish talking. I might be able to provide you some information, some physical information around engagement at the next meeting,
Yes,
because we'll have
good.
that app to do that, whereas I couldn't before. A little bit more there on our community engagement and some of the things that we're doing. It was very abundant to all within policing that due to certain challenges financially and also then subsequently through COVID, we had to have a minimised footprint within local schools, which was something that we didn't really like the position to be in, and we are looking to rebuild. So that's something that's really important to my team, and something they always look to take the opportunity to do. In fact, we probably get more requests than we can service on most months, to be fair, particularly in the summer, as you can probably appreciate. But we always try to spread out our engagement and never go to the same school too often, so we spread it out in regards to the coverage that we have, because you appreciate how many schools and nurseries we have in the district, but that's something that's very key for us for the next generation, and ensuring that we engage with our younger community as well as all others. Enforcement wise, so it's not just about community engagement. Obviously we're here to lock up bad people when they do bad things, so the community policing team particularly, but also the response team, are very, very proactive around this type of thing. And we've looked and given an example. I appreciate you probably can't see exactly on there, but just for your awareness, really, the Maldon Town team themselves, just that small team of officers on their own, have arrested 20 people involved in county lines and organised criminal drug activity, which has resulted in 7 convictions totaling a total of 8 years, where they've seized over £20,000 in cash and a quantity of drugs as well as vehicles as well. They are regularly doing warrants at addresses and taking out enforcement action. So they are really, really been proactive in relation to that. And I would also tip my hat to Spencer and the team here as well, because they work hand in glove with us in regards to this. Appreciate that some of the enforcement stuff is police-led, as it should be, but a lot of the information and a lot of the background work is done in collaboration with our partners at the council, so that's always really, really key to us. Speed checks. So something that's very important to the community in Maldon and the district of Maldon, and the surrounding areas, and understandably so, given that some of the concerns around road safety. So my team, in conjunction with, as Spencer has very eloquently already verbalised, do a lot of speed enforcement at various different places. That's when we get identified as an issue. We've done specific enforcement recently in the High Street at Maldon, which resulted in 54 positive speed checks for in excess of the 20-mile-an-hour limit, and we've also done Wants Road as well. But I mentioned those ones specifically because they're within probably earshot of here, but also on there you'll see that we've done it throughout the wider district as well, and we will continue to do that, and we'll continue to work with our partners at the council and the Community Speed Watch in order to complete those duties. And then we get onto our rural engagement team. So we're really, really fortunate in Maldon that we have some fantastic support by the rural engagement team. You might regularly get them referred to as the REP team from Essex Police. Now they're part of our local policing support unit within Essex Police that work out of headquarters in Boreham. And they provide support specifically around rural crime and the type of issues that there are in relation to rural crime in our more rural parts of Essex. And in Maldon, we are one of their priority districts. So we do get quite a good service from them as a district. So they do some fantastic work in relation to hare coursing, unauthorised encampments, and what we are seeing a little bit more of now more recently in this part of Essex, off-road vehicles in the rural areas. It's something that used to be the bane of my professional life in my previous district in the west of the county, but now we are starting to see a little bit more of that up here. Certainly getting reports through from members of the community and elected members in regards to that. So that's something that we also get support from them around as well, which is very positive. And then a little bit further there in relation to hare coursing. So Op Galileo, as Spencer alluded to, it's both a proactive and reactive operation, and I use that in the terminology ways. We don't just respond to incidents when they're being reported to us. Of course we do that, but we try to predict where they're going to be and also who it is as well, so that we can prevent it from happening in the first place, and then ensure that we, when we need to, can take enforcement action. So you'll see there in the 12 months to March 2023, 180 incidents were reported in relation to hair coursing, which was compared to 363 for the previous 12 months, which was at just over a 50% reduction in relation to the reports of hair coursing. And that's from the strong approach being taken by the REC team as well as local officers as well as part of Op Galileo. So that's continuing. And I was at a meeting recently. I forget the name. I have so many. But Op Galileo and hair coursing and the REC team are committed to continuing their work in Maldon, as I say, and Maldon along with Braintree, Oxford, and I think one other, I forget now at this time of the evening. But it was definitely one of the priority districts for the REC team, so that's always positive. And that, Chair, is my presentation.
Thank you very much, Chief Inspector Ballard. So, members, I'm sure some of you have got some questions that you'd like to present. Councillor Morley, thank you.
Chair. I must say, from the farming community, we have noticed a reduction in hair coursing and the people that go with it. That's the worst thing. But several farmer friends of mine have noticed that with the Land Rover and the pickup that you've got, that's been a bit more visual lately. I don't know whether that's been a conscious thing, but they do, and it's rather nice to see that about all those vehicles. Whether you've got more now, I don't know, but in the last year or so, we've definitely noticed patrolling, or because I'd imagine they're perfect for shooting across that or fly tipping. Was that a conscious thing?
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, it is a conscious thing in so much as we try to appropriately equip our officers in order to do their job. So it wouldn't be particularly cost effective or appropriate to give them a Ford Fiesta to go and try and deal with hair coursing. But I think from your perspective, you are right. They have had some new kit. They have, as they should, because they do a fantastic job. And I think they'd worn out their old kit, to be fair. So I think it was only right and proper that Essex Police supported them in that way. In regards to the increased visibility, I don't necessarily think they've been given more. I think they are just trying to be more visible. Where they've been so successful in relation to some of the things that they've dealt with in the past, they're now afforded the opportunity to be less reactive and more proactive. You know, if hair coursing's down by 50%, that's 50% less incidents that are having to attend to on a 12-month basis. So that time they've spent, or would have been spent, going to those incidents, they could be more visible in the community. And I think that's always got to be our goal, not just for the rural engagement team, but in general. You know, that first pillar for us is that prevent. If we can prevent, then we've got less work to do and less people are victims of crime, and everyone is happy in that regard. So I think that's the key thing around there. So
Just in the rural community, it just lets the visual effect.
absolutely.
Okay, any other members got any questions at all? It won't surprise you to know I've got some questions. I was going to ask you just a couple of questions, an update really with regard to, and forgive me if I've forgotten some of the detail of this from the last meeting, I hope I haven't, but the Maldon District Council Office Hub and how it's working. Do you have an interview room there now? Do you have that facility now? Because I know that was something that there was a little bit of a question mark over before. And also, do you get a lot of people come in to the desk and actually talk to your officers there? Or is it more just from phone calls? Or just an understanding of how that works would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in answer to your first question, we don't currently have an interview room as per what we would require under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. However, Spencer has been working very hard. I can't take any credit for this at all. Spencer's done all the work along with Richard and others at the council. So there are plans for additional area within the council for police and partner use. It won't just be for us, it will be a community hub.
Yeah.
Similar to other hubs in other council buildings in Essex. Yeah. And I think, unless I'm going to have to duck, I think there is plans for that to include those sort of facilities as well for all to use. And it wouldn't be just for officers, it would be for council officers as well. In relation to the front office, yes, we do get people come in and they do come in to talk to us. We don't get as many as you would at one of the larger stations like Southend and Basildon and Chelmsford, but we certainly have enough to require 2 full-time service desk assistants that work out of here and alternate the days. And we certainly have people come in to speak to officers and they use the yellow phone. So yeah, no, definitely do.
I think it's good to have an understanding of that. I mean, the other question that I've got, which I think you almost invited there, was around the theft offences being up so much by 41.8%. So for the benefit of everybody here, how does that relate to other data in Essex, across Essex? And also, you said you'd explain a little bit more about the type of offences they were. And also, do you think that that's due to the cost of living crisis? That was the other question.
Not a problem. Thank you, Chair. I tried to be balanced. I couldn't just tell you all the good news. We have to talk about some of the stuff that we need to improve on. So basically, theft. So theft. We break it down into various different classifications from a police perspective around recorded crime. So you've got theft from a person, theft of a pedal cycle, shoplifting, or other theft. So from a Maldon District Council's perspective, Maldon District's perspective, we are down on all but the shoplifting and the other theft. Okay. So shoplifting is as described, but the other theft would be any other type of theft that doesn't relate to either a shoplifting or a theft from a person. Okay. So it's a bit of a catch-all. So other theft is generally going to be one of the larger recorded crimes because it catches a lot of different classification types of offence. How we compare to the rest of Essex? I would say we are on par as an average. I don't think we're a particular outlier, and we are seeing as a force those offences increasing across the board.
Have you seen increases like that in other areas of Essex? You have? Yes.
Okay. But just to put it into some context, and I reference my colleague to the left, Maldon, some of the percentages with Maldon can sometimes be a little bit challenging because of the low volumes. And Maldon is the lowest recorded crime. If you take Stansted Airport out of the equation, it is the lowest recorded crime area in Essex from a police perspective. So when I say that shoplifting has increased by that percentage, I'm talking 57 offences over the course of a calendar year. Okay. So we are talking huge numbers, but it is still going up. And also, and I'll talk more broadly than just Maldon. In general terms, I do think that obviously there's always going to be, like there was with domestic violence during the COVID pandemic and other things, there's always going to be an impact and an effect on crime figures based on the socio-economic figures of the situation at the time.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, and thank you for that report, which was great. We don't have a recommendation for that as it was a verbal report, but thank you very much for your time, and I think we all found that very informative. I certainly did. So moving on to our next item, we have a performance report on the function of the South Essex Parking Partnership in the Maldon District, which was quite a mouthful. We have, again, this is a verbal report, and I'm pleased to welcome to our meeting tonight Nick Binder of the South Essex Parking Partnership, SEP, who will present the report tonight. Thank you, Mr. Binder.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Spencer's just going to set me up.
Challenging my eyes there. Yeah. I distance.
I left the Spencer's because I couldn't see it from here. With the glasses on. Thank you for inviting me here tonight, give me an opportunity to talk about the South Essex Parking Partnership. I'd just like to give you a bit of an overview of how the parking partnerships were established, our roles and responsibilities, some of the challenges we face, and some of the initiatives that we have in place. So when we talk in terms of parking enforcement, you may hear there's two references. There's what we call on-street parking enforcement and off-street parking enforcement, and they're two different responsibilities in terms of who the enforcement authority is. So in terms of the on-street, that's your public highway, and that's the responsibility of Essex County Council, who are the highway authority. And you may also heard that referred to as what they call civil parking enforcement. And then there's off-street parking and off-street parking enforcement, which is the responsibility of all the individual districts and boroughs and city council within those areas. And each of those councils are the enforcement authority in their own right. So our responsibility is through SEP, which is the South Essex Parking Partnership, is the on-street parking function. There was actually two new parking partnerships were introduced in 2011 by Essex County Council, because at the time they were running their operation at a £900,000 deficit, so clearly they needed to operate that in a different, more efficient manner. So the two parking partnerships were formed. So there is actually a North Essex Parking Partnership and a South Essex Parking Partnership. So South Essex is responsible for Basildon, Brentwood, Castle Point, Rochford, Chelmsford and yourselves. And as you can see, they've got Udderford, Braintree, Colchester, Tendring, Epping Forest and Harlow is responsibility of North Essex Parking Partnership. So Essex County Council has delegated that function to the parking partnerships and those local authorities via what they call a joint committee agreement. So we run that first term for 11 years. We signed a new agreement on the 30th of June 2022. So that will be for another 5-year term with the option to extend annually to a maximum of 8 years. So ultimately, it's Essex County Council's function, but they've given it to the local authorities under a partnership umbrella to deliver it on their behalf, and they've delegated that whole function to us to operate. So in terms of our responsibilities under that joint committee agreement, so it'll be the enforcement of the public highway parking restrictions across those 6 South Essex parking partnership areas. We currently have 35 civil enforcement officers that operate across those 6 areas. We have officers that are based within each of the local authorities. So we have 2 officers based in Maldon, which are within the sort of partnership hub area with the community safety officers. But although we say we have 2 officers based in Maldon, we actually have the flexibility to move those staff around any of those areas. So we have quite a lot of resilience. So if there's ever sickness or holidays or shortness of staff in any area, we can deploy the staff anywhere. If we feel like an area needs assistance with particular parking problems and needs a bit more sustained enforcement, we have that facility. So we do work as a partnership. We're not working in individual silos within that parking partnership. We've got that flexibility to move our resource accordingly. In addition to that, we've got some really good working arrangements with the community safety officers, particularly in Maldon and in Brentwood, whereby we actually pay the councils for the services of those officers, and we empower them and give them the training to be able to issue penalty charge notices on our behalf. And that's worked out really well, particularly in the nighttime economy, whereas our contracted staff, they can't be there at all hours of the day, but a lot of these officers are already contracted to be working within those areas. So particularly in Maldon, they do a lot of work in the high street and the residential sort of parking zones on our behalf, and they can do that during the day and in the evenings. And that's been a really good example of the sort of partnership working that we do. We also do the administration of all the residents' parking schemes and the on-street pay and display schemes. You don't have any on-street pay and display in Maldon, but we obviously do the residents' parking schemes that you have. Another area that we are responsible for is the maintenance of parking-related signs and lines, and that's only parking-related signs and lines. So if it's a yellow line, a residents' parking scheme, limited waiting, a parking bay, that's our responsibility. All your other markings like the giveaways and the white lines, etc., that remains with Essex County Council, and that's their responsibility. So if you see any faded yellow lines, you can come to us direct, and that's our responsibility. We've got local contractors that we use that can come out and carry those works out for us. And another big piece of work that we do is we consider applications for new parking restrictions. So anyone can send an application in to us. We've got an online application form. So if a member of public decides that they feel that they might need yellow lines or they have a particular parking issue, they can apply to us. We will consider every application on merit. We will do an assessment of those areas, so that will include, various site visits to establish, is there a parking problem? Does it warrant a parking restriction? We also assess that against an implementation policy. So we've obviously got high priority down to low priority. And then we will make an assessment of that, and then we will liaise with the joint committee member for each of those respective areas and the lead officer, and we make a decision on whether a scheme can go ahead or not. So I'm sure you have members of the public come to you and say, how do I get yellow lines? Well, just send them towards us, and then we will take the work on from there and give them a rationale decision around that. Just to give you a bit of an overview of how the governance works. So it's actually a stand-alone account. So it's an account that is a responsibility of the Joint Committee. So they determine how that account is run. If there's any surplus or any deficit, it's for the Joint Committee to decide how that's managed. So it doesn't form in any part of the general accounts for each of the 6 areas. So it's almost a standalone, well, it is a standalone business model. So the SEP committee consists of a nominated member from each of the partnership areas. So Councillor Simon Morgan is your Joint Committee member for Maldon. That's also supported by a lead officer, so it's Nicola Sider for Maldon. And again, that links in nicely because she's part of that community safety team. So we all work very closely in establishing, if there's any issues, any problems. So if there's a particular parking problem that is causing concern, either approach Nicola or approach myself, and then we can work out how we can best manage that. Any monies or surpluses that we make within the parking partnership, and the last couple of years that's getting more difficult to establish with all the cost of living, etc. That's ring-fenced in legislation, so we can only spend that on car park improvements or parking improvements and highway measures. And because SEP is not a legal entity in its own right, Chelmsford City Council, the lead authority for SEP, so Chelmsford will deliver the function on their behalf, so Chelmsford can engage in all the contracts and the various bits and pieces we need to be able to operate that for them. So all the staff are employed by Chelmsford City Council, including myself, but we work for the Parking Partnership. So although I'm called the South Essex Parking Partnership Manager, I'm effectively all your managers. So any of those areas, if you've got particular problems around parking, you can come direct to me. I might regret saying that, but and obviously I can give you the advice at that time on what we can, what we can't do, what our responsibilities are, what within legally we can and legally we can't do, and that's probably and I find that's probably the best route to come, and then we can advise you accordingly. We've got some traffic regulation order technicians that work with us that go out and do all the assessments on the signs and parking issues. So again, they're a source of good information. So any advice you need, then that's the place to come. So I will give you just an overview, because we did talk about the importance of it being a single operating model. So it's quite important that we run it at break even and have enough surplus to be able to invest back into the various functions that we deliver. Because clearly, if we don't make that surplus and go into a large deficit position, it comes to the default of the partner authorities to address that. So we've been very successful since we implemented the parking partnership. We've always made a surplus year on. So just to give you an example of the outturn for last year, we've got 2 distinct parts of the operation. We call it the enforcement operation and the TRO operation. So the enforcement operation is what brings the income into the parking partnership, and our only income streams are penalty charge notices, resident parking permits, and on-street pan display. And then we've got the TRO function, which is a cost to the parking partnership. So that's all the technicians that go out and put in all the new parking schemes and all our maintenance of signs and lines. So we managed to cover all those costs through the parking partnership. And as you can see, taking into account all those costs, we still had a surplus on top of that of 129,000. And then that will go back into the invest back into the function. It sort of acts as our capital fund, and there's obviously lots of replacement of vehicles and pan display machines and all those types of bits and pieces that goes in. I think the other important thing that's been quite successful is we've been able to maintain a £400,000 reserve in the parking partnership. That used to be 200,000, but COVID sort of, hit everybody quite hard. We managed to ride through that okay with the surpluses we had, but we've increased that surplus for now to 400,000. So if there is any downturn in the accounts, then we can have that to fall back on. So in terms of Maldon, and the reason I put Maldon on here, because it's probably a good example in that if you rely on just PCN income, it's very difficult to make the function pay for itself, but we acknowledge that some of our partner authorities don't have the opportunities like Chelmsford and Brentwood, where we've got sort of high streets with lots of on-street pans display around the high streets, and that's where we make that extra surplus. A penalty charge notice, unfortunately, the level of charge is set by central government, so we have no control over that, and those charges have been the same since 2008. So 65% of our income is through penalty charge notices, but whereas our costs from 2011 have continued to rise each year, the penalty charge notice line stays the same. So we've got no way of offsetting our increased expenditure against penalty charge notices. And there's a perception that, you can go down the road, there's so much money there, you'll make loads of money with all these tickets. But the reality is there's a cost to issue the ticket, but there's also the bigger cost is to recover it. And there's a whole legal process that the public can go through to challenge PCNs. The profit margin on a PCN is very minimal. So we do rely on these other functions across the parking partnership. So the success of the partnership is that the areas that have the big income opportunities, we can share that across, it's one account, and then we can distribute that across the other areas. So Maldon, we've always run it at sort of like cost neutral, but this is just an example of, with the increase in salaries, which has been very good for staff, and the extra costs, we're starting to find that some of the areas we are starting to go into deficit. We will be looking at how we can improve that, but that's not unsurprising that's what's expected from those areas. So talking about investment, just to give you some of the things that we have done, a big part of our cost is replacement of on-street pan display machines, enforcement handheld computers, keeping up with technology. It moves so quick these days, but the technology is getting faster and swifter. So we like to keep up with that, and we give our staff the best equipment so they've got the best opportunity to work as quickly as they can. We look after the staff from a welfare point of view, so we've invested quite a lot in body cameras, which has been very good. The new digital TRO system, not the most exciting sell to anyone outside of parking, but that was a really important piece of work in that we had a company that went out and remeasured all the signs and the restrictions within the whole of Essex, because there was a lot of discrepancies between that and the legal order, and it was really to make all the legal orders 100% compliant, and that obviously increases our income through being able to enforce all the signs and lines. And I suppose one of the most important one there is over the period of the parking partnership, each of the partners has had an equal share of quite a significant sum of money. So Maldon, along with Chelmsford, the other partners have all had £302,714 given to the partners to invest as part of Section 55 of the Act, which is into car park improvements and highways. And I think most of the areas have spent that money on their own pan display stocks and that in their off-street car parks, so that's been very successful from that aspect. So to give you some sort of data around what we do, I do produce an annual report every year, and your joint committee member will have access to that, and it's always published on our website, and that will provide a whole host of data and patrol data and financial data. So if anyone's interested, that is there. But this is just a bit of a snapshot from that report. And you can see there's various contraventions and contravention codes and where we've issued the PCN. So most of those PCNs will be on what we call restricted streets, which is the single yellow and double yellow lines. And the residents' parking areas tends to be the most activity in those areas. So you can see over the last financial year, there's 1,704 PCNs issued in Maldon, of which the visits to the streets there was 17,663. But I think one of the key things here is that number where we say observations. So I suppose this really gives an overview of how difficult it can be to issue a PCN, because dependent on the contravention code and the type of restriction, a lot of these restrictions have what we call an observation period. So we have to determine, because they do allow people to load and unload. So if it's a double yellow line without a loading ban on it, a vehicle can park on there and load and unload. And if they're seen to be doing that, then they're allowed to do that. So those observations are where we're seeing the or potential contraventions. They've either driven off before we've issued the PCN, so we're in the process of issuing it, or we're doing an observation period and establish that, well, actually you are loading, unloading. And that's probably some of the issues around the high street parking and the type of restrictions you have. It does allow that loading and unloading, and we have to recognise that and allow that to persist. I think in terms of your high street, which is probably slightly different to a lot of our other high streets we have, is the shops that sort of serve the high street. They don't have the service areas beyond it, and if you look at the Chelmsfords and the Brentwoods, beyond the shops are designated loading areas, so they can make the restrictions harsher in the street. But you need to be able to serve these businesses, and it's getting that balance right, and so that's a difficulty. So I think from those stats, we're out there, we're doing a lot of patrols and we're doing a lot of observations, but you know, from PCN wise, it's not every single car that's going to have those PCNs. So I spoke about the Maldon Community Safety Office. So part of those figures, they do an amount of work for us. So they've issued 235 PCNs, 2,182 visits to streets, and again, you know, 1,096 observations. So you know, you see these vehicles, you can observe, and there's an issue, but they need to be given the due opportunity to have that observation period. So I just picked out Maldon High Street because in any area, your high street is probably where most of our activity happens. So again, just some figures. So 272 PCNs issued. The patrol to that street was 2,147 times, and that 1,445 observations. So there's a few figures there. So if I can move on to a few operational challenges, and I think that's our favourite. So there's two really. There's the school parking and there's the footway parking. So really, I've given 3 examples here, and I suppose this is really to demonstrate is that I suppose from a members of the public point of view, this is to say what we can and what we can't do, and what we legally can do. And I suppose some of the discrepancies where the public sort of, you know, can't understand, well, why can't you issue that PCN to that particular vehicle? So if you look at A, for example, now one of the contravention codes we don't have is obstruction. So obstruction does stay with our police colleagues. So if a car's obstructing, then that's not a PCN contravention for us. But in terms of parking restrictions, if there's a parking restriction on the road, it goes from the centre of the road to the nearest private building line. So if you've got a yellow line on a road or a double yellow line and a car's parked on the pavement, that's part of the public highway and the yellow line is included within that restriction. So what we're issuing the PCN for is the contravention of the yellow line, not the fact it's parked on a pavement and it's obstructing. So in example A, for example, that's a single yellow line and they have a time plate with them, so it's not throughout the whole day. So that could be Monday to Saturday between the hours of 8 and 6. So when the car's parked with its wheels up within that time period, our guys can issue a PCN because it's contravening the yellow line. Outside of those times, that car can park there again, our guys have to walk by it. So from a member of the public point of view, it's like, this is madness, but that's the legislation that we're there. And again, that then could be considered an obstruction, and that's really for the police to determine whether that warrants an obstruction or not. Likewise, with B, there's no restriction on the road, so we have no legal powers to issue a PCN to that car. And then if you look at C, which is completely parked on the pavement, it's the double yellow line also includes the pavement, so we can issue a PCN for that vehicle. So it's a minefield of ambiguity, I think is the words to say. And I think the other thing to point out as well is that people park on pavements, they tend to do it very quickly. It's what we call our short-term invasive parker, where they quickly pop up to nip in somewhere to come out. So although we have a reporting system, so we've got an online reporting system that the public can ring us and say, or fill out an online form to say there's a contravention, 9 times out of 10 by the time we got there, that's gone, and that's exactly the same issue for the police. And I think from a police perspective, an obstruction that's stopping traffic getting through and it's been there all day and it's a complete problem, then they have the necessary powers to move the vehicles and do that. But I suppose from parking on pavements, it's not all day, every day. It's we're talking minutes, and that's the challenge. So just in terms of that, within London, we have slightly different legislation under the Traffic Management Act in that there is a blanket ban on pavement parking in London. So there has been a consultation by central government, which was in August 2020, who reached out to the local authorities outside of London to get our views on pavement parking. So the general view was that authorities want to take that on. There's various methods that can happen there. One of the areas they're looking at is that it could be a shared responsibility in that they could decriminalise the obstruction element of that, but I think that comes with challenges. Or they could do a ban on pavement parking. Now the problem with that is there are areas, and I'll use Chelmsford as an example, we've actually got residence parking schemes with part of the bays marked on the pavements. So if it's a blanket ban, you then have to do the reverse and mark the areas where you allow people to park. So that can become a bit onerous. But the end line is government are looking at that, and it will take away that ambiguity in that we will be able to do the pavement parking regardless. The last we heard from my colleague Richard, who's in the north, and he's part of the British Parking Association, is that the Secretary of State for Roads and Local Transport recently mentioned a speech that the government response to the consultation, including their options for change, was a matter of months away. So what months away means, I don't know, but we're hoping, we're all sitting waiting to see what that outcome is, and I think it will just clarify it a lot better, and we'll have a lot more powers to be able to deal with that moving forward. So our other one is the school parking. This isn't a SEP issue, this is a national issue. The problem we have is resource. If I could have a person standing outside every school that had a parking restriction every morning and every afternoon, we'd probably go a long way to solving the problem, but it's not financially sustainable. So we have to try and achieve that with the staff resource we have. We can do that by having what we call a regular school rota, so we're rotating around the schools. I think, as I mentioned earlier, if there's a particular problem outside of school where it's becoming unsustainable, you know, you can either talk to Nicola, your lead officer, come to me direct. And we do a lot of partnership working with community safety officers and police within all the areas to do action days. And that works, but again, as soon as you move away from that, it's the habits can very quickly come back in place. I think we also get a lot of demand, particularly from residential areas around school parking, wanting parking restrictions. Our policy is we will allow parking where we feel it's safe to do so. So we're not in the habit of just clearing roads at certain times of the day. There's either a safety issue throughout the day. It can't just be at school times. So we do try and encourage where it's safe to do so, that we will allow that, and that's part of our implementation. But we've also learned from history is that putting parking restrictions all around schools doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It just pushes it further along the road or into the next area, and you very quickly find residents within those areas are completely miffed as I didn't buy a house by the school, but now you've pushed the parking problem to me, and we have to respect that sort of view as well. So we looked at it a few years back and said a lot of this is more around education, getting to work with the schools. The schools have got access to all the parents, they can do this through newsletters, etc. So we set up an initiative called the School Parking Initiative. I've just put on the side there the schools in Maldon that have taken on this initiative. We have a designated resource called Jack Sharp, who constantly contacts all the schools. So we've contacted every school in Essex and reached out to them. And this really is an educational thing where we get the children involved, we get the schools involved. It's called Free PR, it's called The Character, and it's around care, caution and consideration. And throughout that initiative, we're kind of getting the schools to do a bit of the work, and instead of putting restrictions down, we what we call free PR zones. And this is all around encouraging children to not park within those zones. But if you walk in, or you go on a bike, or you're on one of their little scooters, there will be the children who act as free PR patrols. So they've got all the uniform. And the children get a token as they walk through that checkpoint, and then the token goes into a class pot, and then there's various prizes for the winner of the month, for the winner of the year. So we've invested some of the money into schools that are really engaging in this and really driving it forward. We've bought them little scooter, bike park things, cycle park, I don't know what you call them, that can go into the school. And I suppose the benefit is the parking partnership pay for all this. So all the promotional materials, uniforms, the banners, etc., that's paid for by us, because we want the schools to take this up. You know, the first thing, if you go into a school, we've all got budget pressures. How much is it going to cost me? Well, nothing. But it does rely on the schools engaging with us. So some are very engaging, embrace it. Others don't feel that it's perhaps a problem. And we deliver certain types of package. So there's a gold package, silver and bronze. The gold package is the ultimate one. And by once schools engage with us, then obviously, you know, we're happy to go there and give them a lot more of our resource to try and, you know, if they need the enforcement after this, then, you know, we follow that up. And we get engaged with lots of things like Park and Stride. So I think this one was in Rochford particularly. And it's just working with other local authority bodies or local businesses. We've worked with Asda, we've worked with lots of supermarkets that if they're near schools, and they allow the parents in to park, and then, you know, we give them the designated route to walk into the school, which enables them to walk into the zone to get their token to go into the school. And we found it's very effective if the schools keep driving it and we keep driving it with the schools. But it can easily just drift into the background. So it's a constant involvement of that. And then there's a few more bits and pieces just to sort of, you can see we've got a character. We get some volunteers sometimes to dress up in the suit and go out to the schools. We do assemblies. So our view is it's aimed at primary schools, and we're hoping that, you know, the children we're teaching, we're probably not going to change the adults that come to the school in the car, but this might make children think, or the parents think, as they go on to secondary school and as they leave school, it's just around education. And we're finding that's just as effective as maybe, you know, us putting a yellow line outside of school and saying nothing and walking away from it, and can't guarantee that we get a guy there every day to manage it. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bynes. That's really appreciated. I'm going to come to members to ask any questions they have or any comments. I mean, one thing I will say straight away is that I think as members, and I don't know if other members here agree, one of the biggest things you have from your residents are all the issues around the things you've described, both for the new members that we have and for older ones. I think to have that information tonight is quite useful. So members, do you have any questions? Oh, we've got loads. That's good. I'll start off with Councillor Hayward there.
Oh, mine's going to be yellow lines, obviously. It's always going to be yellow lines. I'm out in Mayland, so obviously I know we're the smaller villages. You're saying about the having a list of obviously how many PCNs you've given out in Maldon. What's it like in the villages? Do you have statistics of how many you come out and get in the smaller villages? Because we very rarely see people. We've got yellow lines, we've got a lot in our village, we've got a lot of bad parking, but we don't tend to have. We've had one parking warden down once this year, I think 3 times over the course of a week, and that's all we've seen this year. So we've got yellow lines, but they're not doing the job. So is there a list you've got to say what tickets you've given in the smaller villages, so we get an idea of how, you know, if you are patrolling our smaller villages, not just mine, but all of us in smaller villages, are you patrolling us as well, or are you just aiming at the larger towns? That makes sense.
No, it's a very good question. Yes, I can get stats per road on the system we've got. We've got a very good reporting system, and it can sort of tell me the number of patrols, the PCNs issued, observations, you know, that. So that can be condensed right down per road. I think the reality is that, you know, the smaller villages will get less enforcement coverage than perhaps the high street in Maldon, because there is a constant stream of traffic and there's more potential issues for us not being there, with buses not being able to get through. So we will look at the network and what it serves and the importance of us being there. I suppose the good piece of work working in partnership with the community safety officers is that's the part of the work we said, because they do lots of work themselves in and out around these areas, and that while you're there, can you have a look at the yellow lines and etc. for us. So I haven't got the stats with me right now, but I won't sit here and say, yes, you get someone there every day of the week. But equally, if there's a particular problem that's building up, because I think we do rely on having to move our resource around and hit areas and then leave this area while we're here, because while I'm there, it's not happening here and vice versa. But we can bring staff over from Chelmsford, for example. But again, we're pulling them from an area. But yeah, we're happy to do that. And I think that's where you can feed that through Nicola, or come to us direct, and we can see if we can improve that for you and give our view on it as well.
Quickly come back if that's all right. Just a quick. Obviously, yes, we do have like school problems. We have a restriction, and everyone parks on the yellow lines. We've got a bus cage. Everyone parks on that, and it causes us a major problem at the doctors. They park inside the double yellow lines. But I think we need, like most of us small villages, even if we had once or twice a year someone was to come out our way, and some people got a few tickets, then obviously it would stop it happening as much. You know, you need to do it once or twice, and it would help us definitely. Thank you.
Councillor Neil, did you have a question? It was it was so fast that I could. Councillor Sizzle Norman, thank you. Councillor Sizzle Norman, thank you.
Hello. I have two questions. The first one is that I live in Burnham on Crouch. I'm a town councillor as well as a district councillor. Do you know Burnham? Do you realise that we have a bridge coming into there's only one way into Burnham, that's over a bridge. Now, as you come over the bridge, at the bottom of that bridge, just about 30 yards on, there's a crossing. Now, this crossing is outside the post office. Now, I have personally nearly got knocked over many times on that crossing because of the fact that it's coming over the bridge. Now, if there's yellow lines right the way down on the left-hand side, on the side that you're driving, in the last 3 or 4 years, we have had several new shops just further on the same side. There's no parking outside, they've got yellow lines. We find that they're having to park in places that have got yellow lines. We very rarely see anybody come and enforce it. What I'm concerned about, and this is probably a council thing as well, planning, that the shops obviously need people to come in the shops, and they need somewhere for their customers to park. Well, the road opposite the shops is the only road where there isn't any yellow lines. So therefore that road gets all the parking for all that area, and when the traffic's coming down over the bridge, we have all this problem. How do we deal with that? I mean, it is a big problem because there's going to be an accident there at any time, because there are people trying to cross the road to get to the shops. There's yellow lines and they can't come. Now, do you deal with situations like that, or how do we deal with it?
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the yellow lines, that's something our enforcement officers can deal with. Again, I suppose when we're there, if we had a man on that yellow line all the time, probably less likely people would park on there. I think if I understand the question correctly, is it the fact that the other side of the road is unrestricted and vehicles are parking there that is causing an issue with passing of vehicles? what's the actual name of the road? Because
Station Road.
it sounds familiar.
You come over the bridge into Burnham,
Yeah.
the only way in, and just past that there's a crossing where I've nearly got run over several times because if people are new to the town, they don't know. I know they're supposed to look at the road, but they don't know there's going to be a crossing almost at the end at the bottom of the bridge. And now it's got worse because of all these new businesses that are now on that side of the road.
Yeah, I probably think the best thing is we mentioned about the application process. If you can fill out, or somebody can fill out an application form, just setting out what the problems are and the challenges, what's there at the moment, what's not, and if there's a solution that anyone feels might rectify that, then our technicians can go out and have a look at that. But we can only comment on the parking aspects of it. So if it's around, is the crossing in the right place or not, that's an Essex County Council issue, and speed and all those types of things fall back to Essex County Council. But we can look at it and give it an assessment over from a parking perspective and whether it's fit for purpose what's there at the moment.
So really you've got to go to somebody else rather than yourself.
Can I? Sorry, if I can just interrupt you there, Councillor. Sorry. So, in terms of a link for people to be able to apply, if we could provide that through the committee clerk, that would be good.
I can do that.
So, just very quickly, is the advice that that's what the councillor should do?
From Yellow Lines or putting a new parking restriction in, we've got the authority to do that.
Right.
But if it ties in with other highway things such as is the zebra crossing accurate there, or speed or sight lines, then that would be more of an Essex County Council.
Highways.
We can give you an assessment from a parking point of view.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I just ask one more question?
Okay,
I'm sorry,
Councillor
it'll be a quick one. If a car is parked with a cover on it in the road, permanently in a place it should be, not on a parking, is that allowed for months on end?
If there's not a parking restriction there, then obviously it's not in contravention of any penalty charges, notices we can issue. I think I can only obviously working in Chelmsford, if it could be determined that it was an abandoned vehicle and that it's not taxed and insured, and it's on the highway, then probably Spencer knows this better than me, but there is legislation around abandoned vehicles within the environmental department. But if it's taxed and insured, it can legally park on the road.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll move on to Councillor Neil now because I'm just wary of the time, so thank you.
I've only got a very quick question. It's really when you're coming out to do patrols and that kind of thing, especially when it comes to schools, do you ever actually give the schools warnings that you're going to be turning up at any time? Because interestingly, we have a big issue from where I am of people parking opposite the school causing absolute havoc. We offer them the village hall car park free of charge to go and park and literally walk around 2 corners to get to the school. But this evening I've suddenly received a text message to say please don't park opposite the school. So I'm predicting you're going to have someone at the school tomorrow. But it might be just my cynical nature, but we only get told as parents not to park there, and magically it seems that the enforcement guys are there the next day. So do you ever warn schools or that you're going to be about?
There's a mole in the camp. No. I suppose from our officers' point of view, no, we don't warn schools we're coming. We'll turn up on a road and go there. Obviously, we use community safety officers as well, and I don't know if they're engaging with schools in other aspects, and they might happen to say, "Oh, we're in the area tomorrow," and someone's given the heads up. I don't know, but no, we don't. We're very random. We're ad hoc. We don't let people know we're coming. So that's the general rule. But yeah, it's obviously found its way around somehow.
Thank you. And were there any other questions from anybody? Did you have one, Councillor Morley? Did you? No, you didn't. Okay, well, that's good. Well, I'm not going to ask any more now because I'm very mindful of the time and everyone's questions have answered mine, so that's fantastic. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Binder. So with that, members, I have no other urgent items of business. And so I am going to close the meeting at, I can just about see the clock, 9:19 p.m. And thank you very much, members. So the meeting is closed.